Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
So this is Thursday morning. It is before the final night of the Republican convention. I would be worried, perhaps, that we would be doing this prematurely. You know, what might we miss on the last night of the convention to interpret and analyze? But it just kind of feels like a non-event to me. It's a sideline. It's not. Nothing has happened that's a game changer, and I can't believe something's going to happen later today that's going to feel like a game changer.
Well, I think part of it is it's overshadowed by external events, hurricane, shooting, and so it's competing with other stuff, and it's also not a normal convention. I mean, the chances of there's always, when you're having a real convention on the convention floor, then there's a chance for some unexpected drama. So I don't think it's necessarily an indictment on the convention that you say that, Bill. We probably disagree, though. I think that this has been. So the question is if it matters, right?
Yeah.
Political campaigns run every day as if, or you ought to. I don't think Trump does this, but you ought to run every day as if everything matters, and you want to win every day and win every facet of the campaign. And so you would assume that a convention does matter and that everything that is said or happens there matters. If it does matter, I think this has helped Donald Trump. But the larger question is, is anybody actually watching this? That part I can't really address.
Well, now, just you took some guff early in the convention because you argued that the McCloskeys segment, this is the gun-toting St. Louis couple, that their segment was a surprise to you in its effectiveness.
Yeah.
And some people thought that you were, how to put this gently, out of your mind.
So I think that one of the mistakes that people in the media and or Democrats in general make is assuming that everyone is watching a convention or a campaign through their prism. And so you may see the McCloskeys as, crazy gun-toting weirdos. But let's say you just came from Mars and you haven't been following this story and you turned on the TV. And maybe you're not coming from Mars. Maybe you're coming from Pennsylvania, but you haven't been following the election closely, and you turn on the TV. How would they come across? That's the perspective I try to approach when I'm doing this kind of analysis. And I have to say, I was expecting to kind of make fun of them. I thought that they were going to be a caricature, really. And but instead of getting up on stage, giving a speech, looking sweaty and given some crazy speech, they gave almost like a fireside chat in a very I think they came across as like regular normal people. They did not come across as right-wing nut jobs. And they were like in their living room. It was like a Mark Burnett type of thing. I think it was well produced. They looked good. They didn't seem crazy. And then I think they made this argument, which I think resonates a lot more than some people want to admit. But the law and order argument, the argument about the chaos and the violence taking place out there, and I think it ended up being pretty compelling to watch. And I think that I think this whole convention is about either bringing people home who used to be with Trump or should be with Trump, according to their theory. And so, if you're a suburban woman who maybe is a Romney Rubio voter, maybe, but you couldn't stomach voting for Donald Trump. I think you've seen a couple things at this convention. One, they've tried to soften up Trump and his supporters by showing them in a more compassionate light. And then I think they've also simultaneously tried to stoke fear about the mob and about the left, whether it's cancel culture or whether it's protesters and civic violence. And I think it's pretty effective.
Well, I'm going to agree with you in part and disagree with you in part. I think it makes some sense for Trump and this convention to focus on their own base because they've lost some of their base. Obviously, they have their hardcore, fervent fans that will never walk away. But Biden is doing better with Republicans than Trump is doing with Democrats. And Trump is behind by a lot. It's certainly fair to argue Trump needs to get some of that swing back to actually win. But, walk before you run. Consolidate your base first. So it makes sense to focus on that for now. And, upper middle class, socially conservative suburbanites like the McCloskeys are a demographic that perhaps they need to reconsolidate. So a segment where they deliver, white suburbanite, arguably quasi-racist messaging. That's not necessarily a bad thing for Trump to do from his, calculating purposes. Where I think I would not overplay the success of that segment and the convention generally is, number one, the messaging of the overall convention is confused because they're at the same time trying to eat into Biden's African-American base. And so it's very awkward to have Vernon Jones come out 10 minutes before the McCloskeys saying Biden is taking black votes for granted. He says you ain't black. He doesn't think we're independent thinking people. And here are the McCloskeys who are worried about mob violence when people are protesting for their civil rights. Like that's not in sync. And two, I actually think the McCloskey segment and all the segments have that much pop. Like, if I was showing that segment in a focus group of right-wing suburbanites, I'm sure it would score well.
Yeah.
But is it enough of a segment and of a convention that it's getting into the broader national conversation for the people who didn't watch the convention, in real time, which is most people? Right. Are they getting these messages?
Well, and I think a couple things, Bill. I mean, it's an interesting questions and conversations. First, I think, this convention is trying to do a few things, right? I think they're trying to tell pro-life people who don't like Trump's rhetoric, you can't vote for Biden. So I think that's a check.
It's bad Catholic.
I think trying to tell
Catholic in name only.
Yeah, if only we could imagine someone who fits that description. I think it's trying to tell suburbanites who are afraid that the left, the left is crazy. You have to vote for us for your own security and safety. And then I think you're right. I think there's an effort to, well, first of all, the African American speakers, I think, are really killing two birds with one stone. On one hand, they're reassuring these white suburbanites that the fear that they're having is not racist, because how could it be racist if the convention features so many prominent African Americans, right?
Prominent's a bit of a stretch, but I take your point.
Well, they feature them prominently.
Yeah.
And secondly, I would say there is maybe an appeal to peel off some African American men. And you may argue that it's inconsistent that these messages clash. I'm not sure that the people that are targeted in those messages put that together. A lot of the mob violence has actually been kind of woke white people. Now, I will say, in the case of the McCloskeys, it was a Black Lives Matter march. But generally speaking, a lot of the unrest and a lot of the violence and looting and stuff has been like young white people doing it. So I think that this convention has has done a lot of smart things. But the question is that you raise, does any of it matter? I think if you're running a campaign, you have to assume everything matters. So I understand, otherwise the Republicans are just like, screw it, nobody's watching, let's not even do a convention, right? I think the temptation or the danger is a sort of media bias that it's possible I'm guilty of, which is to say this. If you are told, write a column about the convention tonight, You cannot write the column that says, yeah, but none of this matters, right? No, I mean, you're writing. I ended up choosing to write about the McCloskeys, but yes, I wrote about it as if people are watching it, right? And paying attention to it. And I don't know how to write the piece that says it. Yeah, but why am I even writing this? Because it's not going to move the needle. You know what I mean? So I think there is an assumption, whether you're on a campaign or covering a campaign, that the things campaigns do actually matter. And that may be a debatable, premise.
Well, I would just argue that. I mean, the ratings for the Democrat convention weren't that great either, and I'm sure a lot of swing voters weren't watching that. I do think the Democratic convention was really consistent in its messaging. I mean, not perfectly so, but enough where you got in the resulting coverage, Biden's a decent man. Republicans came over, like big name Republicans like John Kasich came over to endorse the campaign. Those are the two big things. I mean, there's also the Obama speeches, which were prominent in their own right. And I would actually argue the messages in those speeches were off messages too strong, but not really what the broader convention message was trying to get to.
Okay. Stick with me here, though, Bill. Stick with me here. I think you're right. I think the Democratic convention was more coherent. And I think people like you and me, who are used to writing columns and books and speech, we're thinking of it through like almost an artistic lens. Like all these things should add up and it should make a conclusion. I think the difference is now, and this may be more about me too, right? Like I'm bringing in my priors as someone who is a white person from a rural area. So it just may be that some of these messages hit me harder than if I were an African American living in a city. Like it may be different, but I would just say, I feel like the Republicans, especially the first two nights, were much better at hitting on emotions like fear, anger, and fear. And my theory is that anger and fear are more powerful emotions and lead to action in a way that all the messages you describe Biden having, like Biden's really a nice guy. He'll talk to your grandma for 5 minutes. That's all nice, but fear. And so I feel like the Republicans are doing a better job of using emotion to basically scare their voters back in line.
Well, fear is the most powerful political motivator. You get no dispute from me on that. But I think the Biden campaign is saying, look around you right now. You've all sorts of things to be afraid of. And my decency is going to save you from this. I mean, there's still sort of an implicit fear component to that message. They just don't have to, drum it in such a angry and overt way.
But I think that the public has had time to become inured to these fears. Like the fear that Trump brings. Now, Trump has been scaring us for years. And at some point you're like, well, the world hasn't ended. Okay. COVID is super scary, but we've been living with it now for several months. Right. And now I think what we're having is that the fear of COVID amongst some Americans, I think at least, has been transcended or passed by the fear of the left and unrest.
I think it's just totally backwards. I think it's the fear card that Trump is playing that people are largely inured to. You can't say, oh, no, don't vote for Joe Biden, then everything's going to fall apart. And you're like, hey, buddy, things have fallen apart. Too late. Now, here what I think is the big question, because what is overshadowing the conference and perhaps the convention, and perhaps the convention is dovetailing with it, is what's going on in Kenosha, is the protests and some violence that has been part of that. You had Mike Pence last night. I mean, when George Floyd died, there was an attempt at first by Donald Trump Republicans to say, yeah, that's bad. Justice for George Floyd, absolutely. no one's even trying that right now on the Republican side. Pence didn't even give a nod to what Jacob Blake is going through. And didn't even acknowledge that the worst case of post-shooting violence was the alleged white kid, 17-year-old, cosplaying police officer militiaman who was arrested for murder. I mean, the implication in Pence's words was this is all left-wing mob violence. So now it may be that the illogic of all that and the racism of all that is fine for them. That there'll be enough white backlash in Wisconsin to help Trump salvage that state. I don't think we have enough data to draw a firm conclusion on that one way or the other. I would only say that has not been the experience from late May to now. The people thought that the unruly protests after George Floyd would redound to Trump's benefit, and that it was not the case. Increased chaos helped Biden. Biden's numbers before George Floyd were more like 4, 5, 6, and after George Floyd were 7, 8, 9, 10. Now they've kind of inched down a little bit where your average was 7 last I checked yesterday. And it may be that things will be different now, that there'll be a certain exhaustion on the part of white people. Black Lives Matter, that was fine for a month, but now I'm kind of tired of it. Now this is too much. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense, but sometimes people don't make any sense.
Well, and I think some of it also is, I think that the protesters, the worse their behavior is. Like, if it's a peaceful protest, that's different than, going around to suburban neighborhoods, trying to wake people up, going into restaurants. And this was white woke protesters who went into a restaurant in Washington, D.C.
Right.
And were basically compelling people to do the power sign fist thing. And that gets captured on video. And so I don't think it's just that white people are like tired of talking about police abuse. I think it's that the protesters, through their behavior, have basically changed the story, have changed the narrative. And I think they've helped Donald Trump in the process.
Well, what happened after George Floyd was, there were examples of, white anarchists smashing windows and people toppling statues well beyond Confederate statues that were, not good optics. But that was overwhelmed by the vast majority of people in the streets who were not doing that. Politicians who were not embracing those excesses. You're not going to get Joe Biden, of all people, you're not going to get Joe Biden to cast his lot in with white anarchists. He's not going to do that. Now, you could say, he hasn't condemned the protesters. Okay, we'll condemn the protesters. Well, he did it too late. He didn't do it loud enough. Biden has a certain reputation, understanding, political acumen. I think he knows how to strike these balances. And I don't think you're going to get the average voter to say Joe Biden is a secret anarchist in his heart, or he's going to be led by the tail by these people.
Yeah.
So I just think that's. I mean, look, Republicans are in a jam, and they got to play what cards they have available to them. But
let me just say, I feel a little less confident today about Joe Biden. I think Joe Biden needed the election to happen in June or July. And I mean, this is expected to happen. Races tighten. But if I'm Joe Biden, is he going to now lose Wisconsin? Like, I think I feel less confident about Biden than I did, a month or two ago.
Well, the two things I would say is, first, I would not jump to a conclusion based on, I think there's a New York Times story today where they interview some people in Kenosha who sound a little wobbly on Biden now because of what happened in the streets there, which is silly. Obviously, Biden's not to blame for that, but those anecdotes exist. I can see someone. Well, hold on. So I could see someone drawing that conclusion, but again, I don't think you're going to see 2 weeks of that. You're going to start seeing more mainstream civil rights protesting, overwhelming window smashers in Kenosha. And you're going to see Joe Biden be associated with that, not the excesses. So that's first. Number two, let's say that doesn't work and that something specific to Wisconsin happens, because this happened in Wisconsin. That makes that state slip out of Biden's fingers. Well, Wisconsin's not the make or break state for him. Biden's got a whole slew of targets of opportunity here. He's leading in every swing state right now. There'd have to be a national change in trajectory for this to become a truly competitive race. So a lot has to happen beyond Wisconsin for that to occur. And so I wouldn't overplay what's happening in Wisconsin specifically, so long as this is still a 7-point race.
Yeah, no, I think that's what you just said is really interesting. I feel like there was a time when we thought this race was going to be about Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, with Wisconsin being maybe the most important. And then Biden started to expand the map, and in a way, that scares me a little bit, because I think that kind of gave Biden permission and the Democrats permission to quit running the kind of campaign that I thought they were going to run, which was aimed at winning Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And so I'm a little bit uncomfortable with a campaign that's not aimed at that. I feel like you should view Arizona and Georgia and those states as icing on the cake, but stick to the original strategy that Trump won those 3 states by 77,000 votes. Joe Biden is biographically suited to make a play for those 3 states, and that the campaign should be about that, and everything else is just icing. And I feel like they've gotten away from that a little bit, and it may be like a resource curse, where because they have these other options, they take their eye off the ball. That scares me for Biden a little bit.
Well, so anytime you're trying to expand the map, you run the risk of spreading your resources too thin. But I think all the data suggests they should be trying to spread the map. They are legitimately ahead in Arizona and Florida. It's tight in North Carolina. I wouldn't, bet my chips on Georgia. But Arizona and Florida seem very much in play. I mean, and if you can win Florida, I mean, that is the ball game. You can give up Wisconsin if you win Florida. So I don't think it is unwise for them to be diversifying their portfolio.
Let's see. Well, we've got a couple of things I could bring up. One, I think we've had the meta conversation about how my political analysis gets interpreted as I'm rooting for Trump or something. We've kind of covered that ground, but I feel like it's happened again.
Can I ask you a convention-related question?
Oh, yeah.
Who are the 2024, maybe 2028, but probably 2024 breakout stars of the convention?
If you're looking at it from the convention, it's Nikki Haley, Mike Pence are the top 2.
Not Tim Scott.
I would throw him in there too. I don't know if he wants to run for president, but he did good. I thought Kristi Noem did not do herself any favors. A very boring speech. And then, people like Rubio and Hawley and Cruz weren't even invited to speak. So
that might be a positive.
It could be. It may end up being that way. I think that Pence and Haley are the top 2.
I would not. I mean, I don't think Haley did terrible, but I don't think she did well enough. We were like, oh wow, man, Trump should have picked her. Trump should have dumped Pence. She was gangbusters. She was calm. I mean, look, if you think that the Republican Party has gotten too yelly and could use someone a little more chill, Nikki Haley could fit that role. But it wasn't a speech that was so engaging that you have it. It wasn't Barack Obama 2004.
Yeah, I agree. Nobody. There was nobody who stole the show.
I think I grant you, Tim Scott might not be thinking about it, but I think Tim Scott was a bit of a show stealer. I mean, not a lot of people had seen him that up close before. I think he said certain things that were dishonest in terms of Joe Biden, but put that aside, just as far as having a theory of the case, reason of being, smooth delivery. Like it was a full package. Now Pence, and this is one of my hobby horses. VPs have the inside track in primaries. That is what we have seen since the modern primary era began, 1972. Now, you could argue that that's not a lot of data to work with. There's only so many elections. Fine, I'm not saying it's a guarantee. But, Dan Quayle is the only VP to lose. And he was up against, he was uniquely maligned as VP. And he was up against the president's son. So the initial advantage you should have, association with a president of your own party, being the torchbearer for the legacy that is complicated when the president's son is your opponent. Now, the only other VP that loses is Hubert Humphrey in 72, but that's also a asterisk because he was the nominee in 68 and he lost, so he's more the loser of the last election, not the torchbearer for the previous president. Now, you don't have a lot of Republican VPs that have run for president since 72. Agnew, Rockefeller, they didn't run. Ford got elevated on his own with Nixon resigning. I feel like I'm missing right, so those are those three. Now, Bush does win after Reagan, wins the primary and the general. Quayle did run briefly and then bowed out before Iowa. And then Cheney doesn't run. So, not a lot of Republican examples. The Democratic examples, Gore, Mondale, Biden, that's 3 for 3 VPs since 72 who got their nomination. So, and in the early polling, when you poll Pence, Trump Jr., Haley, I think maybe they throw in Cotton or Cruz, whatever, Pence wins right now. I mean, it's not by a huge margin, but the notion that he doesn't start in the front-runner position, just as it stands, he does. And to have a speech like he gave, look, I actually have my substantive problems with it, but it was a presidential-level speech. He looked more like a president than anybody else you've seen so far. Part of that's the trappings. Part of it is the delivery. I mean, he has thought through how to look like a president. He's not the most charismatic guy. It's a more of a sober presentation than a Donald Trump, but it's still, technically speaking, a presidential cadence and style that he has developed.
I couldn't agree with you more. I wrote my Daily Beast column. So every night of the convention, I've written a column. And last night's was about Mike Pence, and it was presidential. And I think he is, if not at the top of the 2024 list, he is in the top tier, certainly. And if you're a conservative who doesn't like Trump, then there's a lot that Mike Pence has that you may like. And even if you're a Trumpy type person, Mike Pence has been a loyal vice president to him. And I compared it to Bill Clinton being the explainer in chief in 2012. I think that Pence, the Wednesday night's convention to me was very disjointed. And I felt like Pence tied everything together with that speech. And you're right, from an optics standpoint, it's at Fort McHenry, beautifully lit, great backdrop. And Mike Pence's shtick is basically a combination of impersonations of Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush. You take Reagan and Bush, their love child is basically Mike Pence. And so he checks a lot of boxes. And I would not hate it if Mike Pence were, put it this way.
You'd come back.
Probably.
Now, because before you have said, like, if you were with Trump, like, you're dead to me.
I know. Yeah, you're right. I've evolved. I'm not going to commit that I would come back, but I'll put it to you this way. If after Donald Trump, what comes next is Mike Pence, I think we're like in pretty good shape. I would be pretty happy if that is the outcome, because I think it could go sideways a lot worse than that. Even if you don't like Mike Pence, he is like a normal, within the bounds of normal left-right political.
He's not QAnon.
Yes. By the way, let me had lunch with Mom this week.
Okay.
love my mom, love having lunch with her. Ended up turning into an impromptu family reunion because by happenstance, I show up and 10 of my uncles and aunts happen to be sitting outside at the same restaurant. So, but I use this as sort of a focus group, right? As you know, Bill, to get a sense for how people who are not working in journalism or politics see the world. Mom, you'll be happy to know Mom is still not voting.
Not voting.
Well, she's not voting for Trump, and she's not voting for Biden.
Okay.
Maybe she'll vote for state senate. I don't know. But she's still not voting for Trump.
Interesting. Okay.
But she volunteered that she was mad at the Democrats over Jerry Falwell.
Okay, I don't know where that connection is made.
I was confused as well, Bill. I said, why aren't you mad at Jerry Falwell for what he did?
It's the pool boy's fault.
Or why aren't you mad at Donald Trump for like hanging out? Everyone he's friends with is, all of his friends are like involved in some sort of, nefarious whatever. She's mad that the Democrats and the media brought this out, especially during Trump's convention. So I found that to be interesting. So I just relayed it.
It's better than her becoming, a Q supporter.
No, she's not there. But I'm telling you, I think that more people in the journalism, and look, there's a stereotype about people in media, but a lot of people in media have family and friends who are Trump supporters or who live in Middle America, and I think my advice is talk to them more to get a sense. And so when I write things about the convention, like I think this is working, like the McCloskeys, let's say, it's informed by where I come from and the people I know and the people that I still, love, and how would they see this? And so it's these lunches are great for me, not only as a son, but also as as someone who is trying to get a feel for what's playing. It's anecdotal, of course, and I'm not saying it's representative, but it's something. I don't know if you remember, Bill, 4 years ago, it was the Dinesh D'Souza documentary.
Yeah.
That got my mom to vote Trump. So I'm just hoping he doesn't come out with another movie in October.
Can we shift gears and talk about what's going on in my state?
Yes.
So I'm in Massachusetts. We are, I would normally say we are 5 days away from Election Day, but the mail balloting has long begun. So, votes are certainly coming in. And we have, I'd say we have one undercard race, which is Massachusetts 4, which has not gotten a lot of national attention, but that is the seat that Joe Kennedy is abandoning. That has a wide open field there, and I have to be honest with you, I haven't followed the race closely, and I couldn't even tell you the people's names there, but that is going on. The bigger races are Massachusetts 1, which is Richie Neal, the incumbent House Ways and Means chair, versus Alex Morse, the boy mayor from Holyoke. Holyoke borders Northampton, where I live. He's actually been mayor for 10 years, but he was elected when he was still in college at age of 21. I was 31. And you have the Senate race, the Senate primary between Ed Markey and Joe Kennedy. Now, just yesterday, 3 polls dropped that had Markey well ahead of Kennedy, which is a total shift in people's perceptions of the race. And I can't say I'm totally shocked. I didn't think it was Markey had pulled out that much, but he certainly had recovered and had momentum over the last couple of weeks. I think he's had momentum ever since he got the Globe endorsement and the AOC video. And as you know, Matt, I'm not an AOC cheerleader. And I've always argued that the faction of the party AOC represents is a small faction of the party. But I think in the case of this race, it's not that Massachusetts is necessarily super woke or super socialist. It's that Markey began this race being an unusually low name ID incumbent. Has been senator for very long. He won a special when Kerry became Secretary of State. It was a very sleepy special, and hasn't been a high wattage figure that Massachusetts is used to. As the Washington Post recently noted, he's the only Massachusetts senator in 70 years not to run for president.
That's interesting. That's an interesting distinction.
Right. The one thing he has done to give him some pizzazz is to partner with AOC on the Green New Deal resolution. And that's the only reason why the activist left is backing him so forcefully. This is the guy that voted for the Iraq War. This is the guy that was opposed to busing. This is the guy who used to be pro-life. This is the exact kind of guy that the activist left generally hates. But he backed up AOC when no one else in the Senate would, and they are rewarding him for that action. And so now he has a fervent base of support that just did not exist at the start of this race. And it's not necessarily enough to get him across the finish line, but it's a piece of his coalition, a big piece of his coalition. And so to have that along with the Boston Globe endorsement, now most of them newspaper endorsements are totally meaningless. But now you have something that he can slap on his ads and mailers with quotes that carry an argument for him that he didn't have before, which is, this is the guy that does the work. Now, the attack on him from Joe Kennedy was he doesn't show up. He doesn't visit home enough. You never see him. He's in Washington all the time. The Globe and AOC have flipped that message around. He hasn't been home because he's working on important legislation that you and I care about. And so Kennedy has been left without a clear reason why is Markey so bad that he needs to be replaced. Just that he doesn't come home enough seemingly is insufficient. I mean, maybe Kennedy will turn around, so I shouldn't be too definitive about it. But my sense is you need to have, when you Elliot Engel lose and Lacey Clay loses, he's not home because he's living it up with a bunch of corporate high rollers and not caring about our needs. Like, that combination can be potent. But he's not home because he's working on climate legislation is not as exciting and compelling an argument.
When's the primary?
So it's Tuesday. I mean, the final day is Tuesday. But again, the ballots are coming in, and so the ballots have been coming in a period where Markey seems to have momentum. So I would say he's looking pretty good right now.
And this is an heir of the Kennedy dynasty, right?
I mean, this is I'm not a Kennedy family genealogist, but so I always forget. But I think he is RFK's grandson.
Okay, what's their track record of? Because I mean, there've been a lot of Kennedys. What's their track?
He would be the first Kennedy to lose a primary.
Really?
There was one Kennedy, and I can't remember the guy's name. There's one Kennedy who was going to run for Congress. This was like maybe 20 years ago or so, and he gave like a really bad, like, if not drunk, like weird rambling speech at
the people of Springfield
at some sort of Rotary function, and it just sort of sealed this notion of being an unserious person, and then he didn't run after that. But beyond that, I mean, this would be the most definitive, electoral humiliation that a Kennedy has suffered in a state primary. Ted Kennedy lost the presidential primary,
sure,
against Carter. But that's the other thing. Kennedys actually have a long history of not waiting their turn, challenging incumbents, trying to leap ahead. So it's not
I think I think in this environment too, with all the talk about privilege and stuff like that, not great for the Kennedys in the Democratic Party right now. Don't you think that
what's very hard for Joe Kennedy is, I mean, this is seemingly a guy with a lot of promise, a lot of talent, has a fan base. He's not he's not an empty suit Kennedy. I mean, he's been a congressperson, very well liked in his district. People are coming out who know him saying this guy does the work too. There's not a lot of things for him. There's not a lot of easy political paths going forward here, which argue this is why he challenged Markey in the first place, probably. You could say, why didn't you just wait for an open seat? Markey's old, Warren's old, someone's going to open up. But when it opens up, who else is going to probably run? Ayanna Pressley. Well, what if he runs for governor? I mean, Baker can't be around forever. Well, the person who's queued up for that is the Attorney General, Maura Healey, and she is very well liked by Democrats across the state. So this was his last chance to go up against an old white guy for anything.
Pick your opponent, yeah.
So there was a logic to it, but I also think Markey, I do think they were seduced by early polling that showed Kennedy ahead and thinking, Markey's a soft target. Well, yeah, that's because his name ID was so low, which was a fixable problem for Markey because he did the AOC move early on. And Markey had to deliver, he had to execute, but he did execute. So that's where it looks like the Senate race is going to go as of today. Now, we don't have much polling data in Massachusetts 1. So here is after Justice Dems and Sunrise, etc., they beat Elliot Engel in Bronx Westchester with Jamal Bowman. They take out Lacey Clay with Cori Bush. They seem to be on a roll. Here is the hope for the capper, not just any Democrat, but the House Ways and Means chair. Engel and Clay weren't as powerful Democrats as Neal. So much legislation goes through Ways and Means. And the progressives really want to take Neal out, so a more progressive person, Lloyd Doggett, would get elevated in that slot. But this is not the same kind of district as the Bronx Westchester district and the St. Louis district. This is not as liberal a district, and Neal is not an out-of-touch congressperson. This is somewhat so this district is primarily the Springfield area. And you, as an amateur, you might glance at and say, well, Springfield is a minority-majority district. That's very much like the district Bowman won. But it's not analogous. This is not as woke a district. And Neal is literally someone who was raised in Springfield. He was born in the Worcester area, but he grew up in Springfield, lived there his entire adult life, was the mayor of Springfield, been a Congress there for 30 years, comes home, brings home the bacon, retains personal relationships, and the Springfield outer area is a lot of cities and towns that voted for Trump. It's just not that left-wing an area. So you can't come in sounding like a socialist. I think this is going to be the magic ingredient. Now you go to the northern part of the district, which is where Northampton, where I am, is just outside of it, but is sort of, I think, demographically akin to the Franklin County area and some of the other Hampshire County area that's in it. This is, semi-rural, but a lot of college-educated, wealthy white liberals that have decamped there. So that's the area that Neal lost 2 years ago in a race they won by a landslide. So that's where Morse is going to do well. He's going to do well, presumably, in his home city of Holyoke, but Holyoke is not that big of a city. Then you got the Berkshire area to the west, where Neal won 2 years ago, but he's not as tied to the area. Morse may be able to flip it. I mean, I have no hard evidence of it. He did win the majority of support from the Pittsfield City Council, which is the biggest city in the Berkshire area. Not a given that means he would win the rank and file voting there, but not implausible. But even if he won Berkshire County, it's not a lot of people. I think it's about a quarter of the district, whereas the Springfield area and the few Worcester area counties, that is 60% of the district. So if he can't crack into Springfield, which is not that left, and where Neal has ties, it's just not going to work. And without, I don't have the polling data to tell me one way or the other. I don't have a lot of hard evidence. I don't see big endorsements. I don't see huge outpourings of support in Springfield for Morse as of now. I'm skeptical he can pull it off.
Well, you know where to go for your Massachusetts briefing. People have been, I have to say, Bill, people have been clamoring for you to do this. We have our DM Zooms where you and I will do these Zoom conversations with, we'll call them VIPs. And they've been asking for this. I've heard people say, Bill, when are you going to do? I'm not joking. And so here it is.
So when you're watching that race, you really want to watch those Springfield area returns, which is in the southern part of the district, and to see. I mean, Neal will win it, but the way Morse wins is that he keeps the Springfield area close and wins Franklin County, a little bit of Hampshire County that's in the district, and Berkshire County. Again, I think it's a very long shot play. And you're seeing the attempt to use the Bowman playbook and the Bush playbook on Neal. He's loaded up with corporate donors. He does legislation on their behalf. He hasn't done a traditional town hall in 3 years. So it's out of touch, hanging out with corporate people. And I just don't think the people in the Springfield area care about that stuff because they've known Neal for such a long time. You know, there's a brand new train station in Springfield that he helped put together. So he hasn't had a traditional town hall in 3 years. It's not like people are wondering where Neal is and that he's doing stuff for them. And the Neal ads, of which there are a lot of, I mean, this is not a guy who is being caught sleeping. He ran an aggressive effort 2 years ago when he got a primary challenge. He ran an aggressive campaign when he got a primary challenge in 2012 when the district got redrawn and he wasn't sure how he would do in the Berkshires. So he's not asleep at the switch, and the ads are all Springfield bred, did this, did that. I known Richie since he was a kid. Richie's always been around. Richie's always done stuff for us. I don't think taking the activist playbook that sort of makes sense on Twitter and trying to graft it onto Springfield is going to work in this case. And so it'll be interesting to see how the left reacts. Like if what I think is going to happen, which is Markey winning and Neal winning. You know, the left did ads for Markey about how he brought home the bacon for Massachusetts fishermen. You know, they have gone into Markey's record and dug out the insidery things, the in the weeds things to help portray him as a hard worker. And if that works and the Morse play on Neal doesn't work, I wonder how that affects the way they think about how to run these races. Now, I know I've given a lot of details there, and I haven't even gone into the whole Morse controversy and did the state party try to screw Morse and all that stuff, which I'm happy to talk about if you want to talk about it. But that, to me, is my general sense of where the race stands.
Bill, I wanted to ask, you're up there in Northampton, and I think isn't there David Pacman? Is that his name?
Well, Pacman is from here. He does his show now out of Boston, but he is. And
then there is Michael Brooks, right? Who recently
passed away. Yes, he's also from. He wasn't from Northampton. I think he grew up in Amherst, but I knew him. In his
so is there
days.
Something in the water there that spawns progressive thinkers and pundits, or do you know these guys? What was?
Well, I didn't know Morris when he first ran. And I know people who know him now. I mean, because I know Northampton political people, and they know Holyoke political people. And a lot of Northampton people like Morse very much. In fact, there are more signs in Northampton, even though he's not running, even though it's not in the district. This is it's in some places rural and kind of conservative. Springfield area is urban, but not especially progressive. The mayor of Springfield is a Democrat, but endorsed the Republican governor, and is generally seen as a pro-business Democrat who manages a not-so-great police force. But where I am is the Five College area, so you have a lot of upper-educated progressives in these parts. Morse is from a very low-income industrial city, down on its luck city, but he went to Brown. He just came back. And he's bilingual. Holyoke is heavily Puerto Rican. And so even though Morse is a white Jewish kid from Brown, he could come back, speak the language, and play upon the fact that the Holyoke establishment had been doing a terrible job and win an outsider race. So he has been well-liked in his own city. But it does breed a lot of, I think, ambitious progressives with not a lot of easy places to go. There's not a lot of things you can run for. And Massachusetts statewide is full of ambitious people, particularly in the Boston area. So, like Morse, Morse could have waltzed into a state representative seat. There was an open state rep seat this year, which is basically Holyoke. He could have just walked into that. And he made a decision that he had bigger ambitions for himself. And look, if he can hold Neil down to single digits, I mean, Neil's old. He's going to retire someday. Maybe Morse is queuing himself up for a win down the line. But he's got to crack into Springfield, because if some other Springfield person comes up and Morse still isn't popular there, you can't win that district.
Well, just wait till I get into some of the controversy taking place in the Harper's Ferry City Council bill, but we'll save that for another episode.
And you've no questions about the Morse controversy?
I don't, but I have a feeling that some of our fans will be mad at me and you if we don't. You want to brief us?
Well, just briefly. So there was a letter from the college Dems to Morse that got leaked to a college newspaper, saying we have reports of you having relationships with college students and pursuing college students that are making them uncomfortable, and we request you no longer participate in College Democrats events anymore. So no names, no allegation that he did anything improper he was a lecturer at UMass. No allegation that he had an improper relationship with someone that he was teaching directly. And then through the Intercept's reporting, there was the allegation that some of the people charging Morse were people who were trying to entrap him and were baiting him through dating apps and texting, and were interested in advancing in Democratic politics and making good with Neil. Now, Neil has denied any involvement with this stuff. There's now an additional allegation that people in the state party were involved. But my own sense of it is I don't see any evidence that the people in the state party, people were approached in the state party by the college Dems, but it seems more like, hey, we got this really mess up situation here, what should we do? Not, we're going to screw Morse now, can you help us? It may be that this college Dems got some bad info from bad actors, and they got snookered. I know the college Dems have said, hey, it's not just these two people, there are other people that we think are on the level. So no one really knows what exactly happened, if any of these allegations have merit, or even if they have merit, do they rise to the level of actually being scandalous, and how much active deviousness was involved. I think the episode, wobbled Morse for a bit. Now, Morse initially apologized. I apologize if I made anybody uncomfortable. So he gave some credence to the allegations. But then as this other coverage happened, there was a sense that Morse was being wronged. Progressives kind of doubled down on him. He got an influx of online donor cash and a lot of national attention since then. So it may well have helped him in the long run and narrowed the race. I don't think it is the dominant factor now. I think it has faded from the coverage. I don't think he hasn't been able to get Neil accused in any serious way of being involved. And the ads that are running right now don't engage in it at all. It's Neil bringing home the bacon. It's Morse saying Neil is corrupted by corporations. And there's an attack ad campaign against Morse through a super PAC. But it's about Morse's record in Holyoke. Morse hasn't shown up to school committee meetings. There was a 12-year-old kid that was beaten up by the cops, and Morse didn't reprimand the police. It's not about the sexual controversy. So if he loses, some people are going to say, well, it's because the state party, underhandedly, damaged him. I don't really think it's what's determining this race at the end of the day.
Are you going to go counter narrative and instead of writing about the Republican convention, write about Massachusetts. It sounds like there's a lot of interesting stuff happening.
Oh, there is. I need someone to want to pay me to write that article, so I'm not on assignment for it right now.
This would make a 5,000 word magazine piece or something, right?
We'll see. I have an assignment from a German newspaper to give kind of like a lay of the land of social unrest and how that affects the election. So that's my assignment between now and the weekend.
Hey, your involvement with neo-Nazi groups in Europe, Bill, does concern me. I'm going to have to flag.
This is a liberal German newspaper.
I always wonder. I've been approached. I've been approached over the years, and I've done interviews for groups. In fact, I did something this morning, a Zoom conversation. It was me and Jonathan Martin speaking on behalf of some international center-right group, and seemed very legit and everything. But when you're approached by like these outlets from other countries, it's a little dicey sometimes. You know what I mean? Like I can't read German to know exactly what they've written in the So sometimes it's a little scary.
Well, I wrote for this paper a few times back in 2016. And it's a challenge because you don't know your audience. What do they know? What do they need to be told?
Yeah.
And you end up going through a lot of obvious things just to make sure that they're caught up. And I've gotten the sense from the editor there. I mean, they're getting what's happening in Wisconsin. They get pieces of it, and so I'm being told, German readers, they can't believe that a 17-year-old had access to a rifle and shot somebody. Is your country?
I have to tell you, man, that story. I mean, look, these kids who go in and shoot up a school usually seem, the trench coat thing. I mean, they seem disturbed, obviously disturbed, right? And so it's scary, but it's like, okay, this person looks and seems deranged. But that kid in Wisconsin, who I guess he drove from Illinois, he could have been like a college Republican or something. You know what I mean? Like he if I had a son, he might look like, I do have two sons, but it was scary to me because that kid did not seem like he was interviewed, I think maybe by the Daily Caller. He was interviewed by somebody before it happened.
Right.
And there's now apparently he was cleaning up graffiti and stuff. And it's super scary to think that someone that seems normal would get caught up in something like that. And obviously he's allegedly killed two people. So I don't want to minimize the fact that those two people, their lives are over, but this guy ruined his own life too. Crazy story.
Well, and from the German perspective, it seems that they look at this and they're basically saying to me, is your country falling apart? Tell us if it is or not. I mean, that's essentially the assignment.
Well, when Donald Trump, I mean, I wonder how much of this kid was obviously a fan of Donald Trump. And I wonder if Marco Rubio was president or Nikki Haley was president, would he have done this? You know what I mean? Like, is this the product of having a president who is stoking violence and the culture war? And I suspect that he may not have.
I mean, we have had incidents of far-right domestic terrorism and violence.
Yeah.
Typically during Democratic presidents. That's when the rhetoric gets overheated on the far right. I think this is unusual to see this kind of thing happening, and this is not the only incident.
But I don't, Bill, this guy, maybe I'm wrong, I haven't been following it closely, but I don't think they've found any weird, white supremacist stuff in this guy's background.
Well, his Facebook page was all Blue Lives Matter.
Okay, but Blue Lives Matter means that you care about police officers and that their lives matter, right?
No, it seems like, I mean, we're going with very little anecdotal evidence here, but it seems like he had a big police obsession.
Yes, yeah.
And dashed out here to be like a sort of a militia / police auxiliary.
It's like a George Zimmerman type situation.
Yeah. Which is not to say that somehow that we're humanizing him. I mean, just this is what we seem to know. I mean, it's a pretty screwed up thing as a 17-year-old to grab a rifle, run out to a protest, and think you're going to cosplay police officers and kill 2 people. That's messed up in its own right. It's just a different.
No, but my point is, the guy who's like listened to Megadeth a little bit too much and has a weird white supremacist tattoo and plays too many video games and wears all black, and like that dude is super scary. And I'm like, okay, I kind of get that this guy's messed up. If you're a young guy who like loves the police, I mean, maybe that's become verboten today, but like that's kind of a red, white, and blue all-American
this is the whole
kind of thing. That's what makes it scary.
The whole issue is that, I mean, look, I'm not going to argue that every police officer is a violent racist, but obviously some are. And to a lot of people who are on the brunt of this violence, fatal or non-fatal, it's pretty easy to say, look, this is something systematic here. And so when you see a case of someone who is a police-obsessed teenager and quickly becomes a murderer, it really confirms that narrative.
Yeah. But if you told me like, hey, my nephew Bobby wants to be a cop. He really cares about law enforcement, and he did a stint as a cadet, like in some training academy. That doesn't raise red flags to me. I'd be like, well, it's not my cup of tea, but we need people. We probably need some people who want, like when I was a kid, there were all these people who hung around at the volunteer fire department. And this was their idea of a good time. Like that's what they did. And it was almost like a subculture of people who like loved. I didn't think they were going to become arsonists. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that seems like a really horrible day to me, hanging around in the fire hall. But God love them if they want to do it. More power to them. It didn't send up a red flag that like these people are, going to be dangerous.
Well, I think what has to happen, in my opinion, in the recruitment process, this is true for anything that involves deadly force, police officer, military, you want to recruit carefully. You want to recruit people who want to do these jobs for the right reasons and not the wrong reasons. And some people who are super into police do want to do it for honorable reasons, but some people are into it for like definitely the wrong reasons. And you don't want to be in a situation where to be a police officer is so culturally maligned that only bad people want to be police. Yeah. You want there to be money.
Inverse selection is going to be happening.
Right.
It has to, right? The people who, if you're a college educated person who wants to like fully think through the ramifications of your action and like, you would never say like, I'm going to go become a cop, because like, that's a tough gig. Mm-hmm. There's like, why would I do that? Why would I want to do that? And so you end up like, the more maligned the police are, the worse the inverse selection problem becomes.
This is why actually I don't like the line that I've heard, which is, stop trying to have police be social workers. These are different jobs. I'm like, so you want the police to be solely quasi-military personnel? I don't think you actually want that. You want police to have, a compassionate sensibility embedded in their community, able to have skill sets that can talk down situations and reduce temperatures. That requires some social worker skills.
Yeah.
So, and there are police who are like that. There are good police who are like that. And you want to do the recruiting and have the training to develop that. And not say only bring in the police when it's time to like bring the hammer down. Like that. I don't think that's a great situation.
It's a horrible situation. it's a horrible situation. I mean, in this case, it seems to be. Now, I don't, I haven't been following it that closely. If a cop tells you to do something, you should probably do it. If they try to tell you to stop, you should probably stop. Probably shouldn't try to get in your car and open the door. But then to shoot somebody 7 times in the back, I don't get how that happens in this environment. Like, wouldn't you be thinking, if you are a police officer, in light of the context, in light of what is happening in the world today, like, never mind the fact that you shouldn't do this to begin with, but to be that trigger happy. And I wonder how much of it was a legitimate fear for the police officer's own safety versus, no, you're going to listen to me because I told you to stop. And if you don't do what I say, then this is going to be the ramifications. And not just for you, but if people stop listening and doing what we say at the macro level, that becomes a big, big, big problem. And so it's just a horrible situation, man.
Well, let's leave it on that note.
Yes.
Gone for a bit. So when we talk next, the convention will be done. The Massachusetts will be done.
Wait, are we doing a DM Zoom, or are we taking the week off?
I can do it.
Okay, because I think the people they want to hear. So why don't we just tentatively plan on doing it, and then we could talk about Trump's speech.
Sounds good.
Okay. Follow us on Twitter at the DMZ. And Bill, anything to plug?
Well, join our Patreons if you want to be part of the DM Zooms and you're not already supporting us on Patreon. I had a Real Clear Politics piece on the front end of the week previewing the convention, which I think is still a relevant piece, which is both the Democratic convention and the Republican convention are trying to persuade Republicans. They're both competing for Republican voters in their own way. And it says a lot that that's where the battleground of this race is right now. Biden trying to eat into the Republican base and Trump trying to salvage the Republican base. And the notion that Trump has a rock solid base, I think, is belied by the data. I mean, it's largely rock solid, but it's not at full capacity. He needs to get it back to full capacity.
That's a great point. And check out my stuff at the Daily Beast. I'm writing about every night. That's why I'm sleep deprived and tired. And but the struggle continues. We will keep bringing the American people the information that they need. So stay tuned.
All right. I'll talk to you tomorrow and next week.
See you guys.